right into the project review board website, and now it's asking me for.
Tell me what you're trying to do.
Just trying to get into the website.
Just type in freeportmaine.com.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that will get me to the.
You're trying to get into the packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, our electronic packet that we share online.
You may not be online.
Yeah, I think you're in. I'll be right back.
I'm the right one.
So normally I just look at this favorite. This happened to me. As far as I know, I don't have it.
Yeah, then I wouldn't bother. Go ahead and close that.
Let's just close that out.
Yeah, just close that. Hit a plus. Okay, freeportmaine.com. Put www in front of it, just in case. Yep. Search, do a web search. Right there. I see you are. Now you want to scroll down and go to the bar, back up. Go to read up, yes. Scroll down, get the packet.
What brought you on that road?
Scroll up. What you want?
The agenda and all the supporting.
Go ahead and click on that. Scroll down.
What they do with that?
Go up. There you go. Now you can click on those. What I would do is, so you don't lose this page, to get each individual block, or control or right click on each one. On the PDF. Yep. See it's see when it's a hand, and then you can open it in another page.
So that's not open, just right click on it.
And then open a new tab. Try it. That way you leave this one there. Yep. So now that document is in that tab. You click on that tab, you can read it. And now come back to the index, go here, and right click on the next one you want to see, open a new tab. There you go. So what I would do is I would say more, you got to go to each meeting. So.
Kyle provides like a link
Yep.
to a site.
Yep.
That one I was trying
Yep.
to get to. And in fact, at home today, that's what I was going through.
Yep, yep. I'm not sure why. It was weird that it wouldn't go to our website directly. That was weird.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. How you doing? Good. But you went through it through Google when you got there.
Fine for that.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
We got your worked around for tonight. Yep. I'm gonna start this, and we'll be silent until you're ready to go.
Okay.
It comes forward.
Jason's zooming in. Other than that,
How are you, Sharon? What happened last week?
Recording in progress.
Oh, that's going around. Lynn's coming and Jim's coming, right? How you doing? Good, how are you? Great, great.
Can you leave Zoom,
Okay.
muted and leave us silent, but you go ahead and put us on. All right, I'll call you back when you're start. Yeah.
Been halfway rock for the last 3 days.
Lynn, can you hear us? Lynn, are you there? Can you hear us? Yeah. Can you unmute her? Right there. Yep, click on Ask to Unmute. We moved her. She's under William Hamlin. Go to attendees. And Donahue, we have to move him, do we? Yeah, promote him again. Give it a second.
That's the applicant for that woman right there. The applicant.
Okay. And go back to panelists on the top. And what's his first name?
Jason?
Jason, can you hear us?
Hear you.
Great, thank you. Lynn, can you hear us? Lynn's connected, but I don't think
Yeah.
she's talking to us right now.
Lynn, if you can hear us, you'll have to unmute yourself to answer. She raised her hand.
Do ask to unmute. See, yeah. She raised her hand so you can hear us. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to lower her hand.
You got Jim here too.
Hey, Jim.
How are you? Good.
I'll wait for him to come back. You want to go?
Should we wait for Todd to come back?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
Hi, thank you. That's stressful.
What's that? Is that coming from
Did
someone?
it burn?
I think it's Lynn's audio.
Can you ask her to mute?
Yeah.
Lynn, could you just mute when you're not speaking?
Yes,
Sorry, we just get a lot of feedback in the room.
I'll try.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready? Tom, we good?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Here,
Everyone, mics on? Good evening, everybody. We've got everybody in attendance tonight except two are by Zoom, Lynn Hamlin and Jason Donahue. Hello, guys. And we have a big agenda, so we'll get started. On the agenda, the summary of the agenda for tonight is Varney Road subdivision of 42-unit affordable housing project is up for final approval, pending our consideration. 172 Main Street, AEC Engineering for a 2,500 square foot addition for site plan review. LL Bean is back as a condition of their site plan amendment approval to share a landscaping plan with us. Easted Family Holdings at Desert of Maine to request a release from a buffering obligation from their prior approval. E&R Properties at 140 Main Street, Tuscan Bistro for design review certificate. And finally, Great Cabin 8 for village overlay certificate and a requested waiver. Kyle, you have a staff update for us?
Yeah. So design review ordinance update, I think we're looking to do a joint meeting December 4th with the project review board and planning board. I believe that email went out looking for people's availability for that. So we're going to have North Star presenting the update and feedback on some of the public participation we gathered from the various tabling here at Town Hall and the election on some of those design review posters and renderings. So we have that coming up. Update on the comp plan. We had our future land use workshop meeting on Monday the 18th. It was really great. There There's a lot of participation. A lot of people showed up. Started with an informative kind of presentation on, the idea of what future land use planning is, and then some interactive exercises looking at some potential different future land use maps that North Star had put together, and we got a lot of feedback there. Topics reviewed by the planning board this past month. We had the multifamily subdivision exemption ordinance amendments to the zoning and subdivision chapters go for their public hearing. So those were recommended by the planning board, so they'll be going to the council probably sometime in December for their first meeting. And then there were 2 applicant-driven requests as well for zoning amendments, a zoning map amendment by Maine Beer Company for a parcel abutting where Maine Beer currently operates. They're looking to do a zone change on half of that lot. So there's the public hearing for that. It's also recommended to go forward to town council. And then there is a public hearing for a zoning text amendment by the Desert of Maine to amend the definition of campground to allow cabins to operate on a yearly basis instead of needing to operate. It's currently worded that it has to be seasonal. So they're just looking to kind of expand the opportunities for cabin camping year-round, similar to how tents and RVs currently operate. Update on staff approvals. I didn't put anything together for this time. We have had a few staff approvals in the past couple of months. I'm trying to work with code to get a better format so that instead of just doing some situations where something comes in and I sign off on it and then it disappears, that we have better kind of record keeping that I can just dump in a folder and put in your electronic packet folder. But we did have a couple, for instance, sign applications come in that fell under the staff review approval. One for the Hilton Garden Inn in the Village area, one for LL Bean. And I know that there was an amendment at the school to the disc golf course with a change in one of their holes in kind of the fairway direction. So I'll have more on that the next time we meet, though.
Thanks, Kyle. Any questions for Kyle? I'll share publicly what I shared with you, that I thought the staff report was great.
Thank you.
Has everybody reviewed the minutes from the October 16 meeting? And any questions, comments, or is there a motion for approval?
I move we accept the meetings as presented.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Do we have to aye
Get the wording, guys.
verbally?
Yes. So we have to roll call.
Oh, yep, roll call vote.
Okay, so Berger,
Yes?
Donahue.
I was not present, so I abstained.
I'm trying to memorize this alphabetically here.
Hamlin?
Hamlin, yeah, okay. Monteleone.
Aye.
Yes.
Madeira, you should have gone ahead of Monteleone. Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
First agenda item is Varney Heights on Varney Road, and give us a review, if you will.
Yep, so this is just procedural overview. This is the final subdivision review and site plan review for a 3-story, 42-unit affordable housing development. Good. The property is in the Commercial 3 and RR1 districts, although the project area, we're just looking at the Commercial 3 district. One update, I'll just kind of start off with this, with the affordable housing developments. There does need to be an EUA and restrictive covenants included as part of the ordinance. We got our final legal review back just a little while ago, so that was included in front of your chair before you sat down. There are a couple conditions based off of that document that we'll want to add if the board is ready to approve the project later on. Those conditions there are two of them relating to third-party enforcement. So the PRB, as part of our Appendix G12 in our subdivision ordinance, is required to approve a third-party enforcer in the EUA document that the applicant included in their application. So the PRB does need to approve Maine Housing to be that third-party enforcer. So that should just be a condition of approval. It would need to be added to the plan. So I know the applicant, I think, brought the recording plat to be signed tonight, but we would have to have that updated and then the plat come back for signing at a later time. And then there is a second condition in that legal review that required a note to the plan. It's the last bullet point on page 2 of that document that says any amendments to the EUA required by Maine Housing should be reviewed and approved by the town to ensure that the affordability standards remain in place. So just to call that out early on so we don't lose track of it. In general, the project, I think, meets all of the requirements of the ordinance. The applicant included a wetlands report and delineated the wetlands on the application. None are proposed to be impacted. I wasn't here for the preliminary review of this project, but I believe that the parking was discussed at the last meeting. So typically in the commercial districts, the board, I think, is able to work out what the minimum parking requirement is based on an analysis provided by the applicant. In this case, because this is an affordable housing development, state law requires that no more than 2 parking spaces per 3 units are required. And that's in our off-street parking standards as well. So that would bring out their requirement to be 31 spaces, and the project proposes 47. So there is not an issue there in terms of parking. The applicant included a traffic study, stormwater management report as well. The stormwater was reviewed by the town's peer review engineer, who offered final comments, which I believe were added. The applicant submitted a response to those. Really, there was only one comment that needed to be addressed, which the applicant included in some follow-up supplemental information, which I included in the packets. If you would have seen that document, it talked about some waiver requests for street ordinance standards that were originally on the recording plat. Because we're not actually looking at a road or a street here, that waiver request wasn't necessary. So one of our staff comments to the applicant was to remove that from the recording plat, because this is more of an access drive to the parking lot. So it needs to only follow the standards of Section 512 in our zoning ordinance. And see if there's anything else I wanted to state. I think that was pretty much it. The last thing to note is that you'll notice in the proposed findings, in the motion, the conditions of approval, the amounts for the PGs and the inspection amounts were left TBD. At the time, we hadn't received final review of the site work cost breakdown that the applicant submitted by the town's peer review engineer. So we would just condition that on the fact that, if whoever makes the motion at the time can word that in a way that the town approve, the PG and inspection amounts based on review and approval by the town, that would work. But we do have that cost estimate. It would only be for the site work portion of the cost estimate. We would not include the building. So I believe the total cost estimate was somewhere in the range of like $8 million, but I believe the cost estimate for the site work was more in the range of $800,000. So Happy to answer any other questions, but I'm sure the applicant can present follow-up information as well.
Anyone on the board have a question for Kyle before we go to the applicant?
I just one board. Kyle, can you help us understand to what extent the compliance with affordability standards are a component relative to our review and approval?
Yep. So section 536 of our zoning ordinance is our standards for affordable housing development. So in there, it references the state law that was a part of the LD 2003 changes. And in there, there's certain affordability thresholds. So over 50% of the units need to be affordable as it meets the definition, and then there's the percentage of AMI breakdown for renter versus owner type households. So the applicant has added a note to their recording plat, the updated one that I sent out, that clarifies meeting those standards of section 536. One of the legal comments, though, in those comments that I gave you, I think speaks to adding something to the.
It's 4A1.
Well, so there's, I think, 3B1 talks about the difference between the state affordability standards and the town's affordability standards. So section 42 versus section 536 of the ordinance. So the recommendation there from the town attorney was to have the EUA updated to reference both of those sections, the state and our local section 536, and state that the stricter would apply. So we had already provided a condition of approval since we hadn't received final legal comment yet. We had recommended a condition of approval that said final legal documents pertaining to the affordable housing development provisions be reviewed and approved by the town attorney. So that review and those comments in our legal review that speak to needing to amend the EUA document, we would have fall under that. So we would just want to clarify in the EUA the difference between the affordability standards at the state level and the affordability standards at the local level.
So I think that the EUA is a document that I haven't seen in the materials that were presented to us, and maybe it's called something different in the materials that were presented to us, but I'm concerned about weighing in on something that hasn't been spelled out.
Should have been added in the follow-up materials.
Got this today.
Not today. I think it would have been earlier than today. So it was in the document called Varney Heights Supplemental Materials. It was that first piece of their, so that wasn't in their original submission, but it was in there, I believe, when your original packets went out at the end of last week.
Supplemental info section.
Yeah. So there's there's the extended use agreement and program declaration of covenants. So that's the document that the town attorney is referencing with those comments. And it's the one that we had made a general condition that document still needed to be finalized and reviewed by the town attorney. I think the ordinance requires that a draft be submitted with the application, and that it be finalized prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued for the units themselves.
Forgive me, Kyle, maybe I'm uniquely having difficulty here. I see the file that's included that shows supplemental info, 11/13/24, section 536, which is a memo from E.S. Coffin. But that's the only,
There's also 11.8, but it's not that.
1 second.
It's a document. This says extended use agreement and program declaration of covenants. Is that the one you're looking for, Kyle? Yeah, it popped up in mine. Too.
Oh, sorry. In the electronic folder, they're all different. I had them broken out as separate documents. They weren't.
it's the
So-
LIHTC extended.
Yes, LIHTC extended use agreement. Yes, sorry. In my own folder, I had combined files. So
Can you, so we have,
So, but this approval is asking that we confirm, like, we enter findings that these materials satisfy these technical requirements.
So it's a standard in the zoning ordinance as well as the subdivision ordinance, I believe, that the declaration of covenants be included in the application. We've conditioned it that the final review be approved by the town attorney to make sure they have what they need to have in them. Say on the recording plat, there's a note that specifies the applicants required to meet the affordability standards of 536, which outline the specific affordability thresholds that are required, the percentage of units and the,
So you're not requiring, you're not asking us to enter findings that this document is legally sufficient relative to the requirements of the ordinance or section 536.
correct.
That's all.
good.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions for Kyle? I have a question for you, Kyle.
Yep.
If we get to the point that we are presenting a motion to act on, we're going to need wording on the 2 or 3 amendments that you mentioned. If you can think of the wording to help us through that. Great. The applicant can give us an update.
Evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman, Jim Coffin, E.S. Coffin Engineering. So Kyle did a nice job expressing where we are with this thing. The 2 big hurdles, or the 2 big items that were left in our lap, were trying to find more parking, if you will, and we've added 4 spots. And we also had Sewell present their parking generation report, and that basically came back at 29 spaces. We're at 47 now, so we've added 4. Also, you asked for more landscaping in front of the building. We've added that as well. And the fence now is a split rail fence instead of a chain link fence. So those are the 3 big items that were left from the last time I was here a couple months ago.
Was the
Going
fence
to greater
added
depth on
recently?
this, or?
That's helpful.
The fence is, I thought from last time that you were required to do a chain link fence, but you were able to.
No, they're letting us do a split rail, which is great, because it's going to look so much better than that chain link will.
Much better, that's great. Good.
So I did miss the section, Kyle, you talked about, the plans can't be signed tonight because of,
Those 2 conditions that were recommended by the town attorney
Oh,
that would need to be
okay.
added, those would need to be added to the
can you
recording
send me that
plat.
language, and then I'll add them and I'll drop them off?
Yeah, I emailed the legal comments right before I came in, but I can clarify
Okay,
later on which one specifically
Excellent.
would. Yep.
Just a general question, not directly related to approval, but there was some discussion if a multi-use trail were to want to come across, your land, where did that end up?
That's shown right now on the residential side of Concord Gully Stream, I'm sorry. And we couldn't fit it in the C3 district, if you will. There's just too much going on with the pond and the building and the parking lot. So we have shown it on the residential side.
Great, good, thank you, that's great.
One other thing I can mention as well in reference to kind of pedestrian kind of travel in the area. I think it's section 527 of our ordinance, has a number of standards for commercial districts. One of them being that projects provide a 5-foot wide travel way across the property. So this property is a little unique, and then there's that kind of square property right in front of the proposed building, but the applicant has that 5-foot travel way coming from the
Parking lot.
the left side, and then kind of connecting into the access drive out to the other curb cut. Just should be noted that there is no other existing sidewalk in this stretch of Varney Heights.
Today.
Correct.
Is that walkway going to be lit?
We don't show any lighting on the plan, but I'm sure we could put some baller type lights that you see at colleges, campuses.
Yeah,
That wouldn't
that
be a
might
problem
be-
at all. It's a good idea.
It looks like it could be a little dark in there.
Sure.
Yeah, so I just recommend that if the board wanted to add that in, just make it a condition of approval that the photometric plan be updated to show that new lighting.
I think that'd be a good thing to do.
That's a good idea.
Any other questions from the board? Lynn or Jason?
Yes, I put my hand up. Can you see it?
We see you.
Yes, I see it.
Thank you. For some reason, I could not find, under the supplemental information, the new landscaping. Might you have it on a chart in front of you that you can put up on the screen? I can't find it in my packet, but that's probably me. If you presented new landscape drawings.
Sure. It's actually on the site plan, if you will. It's not a separate landscape plan at all. You
I
can.
see.
They're right in front of the building here. The total we have there, I think we have 120 plantings total being proposed with this project.
But I was specific, you had mentioned that you had added landscaping in front of the building.
Yes, without question. We added a bundle of landscaping in front of the building.
And the side of the building facing Route 1 also?
Yes, we did there as well.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions for the board before we open up to the public? This is not a formal public hearing, but we always invite members of the public to ask questions if they care to. Okay, great. Is there a motion?
Sure, Ford.
So here's my thinking. If we're prepared to make a motion, go through it as written, except for the last section under 3, which is G, skip that. And then we'll call on Kyle to propose wording for the 3 or 4 changes that we've already talked about.
Including the
So
photometric plan?
I think we'd want to leave G in there.
Okay.
Because there do need to be general revisions to that EUA document that would fall under that condition. But then there would be 2 additional conditions that would require plat revisions to be added. So I have those highlighted here, so
You'll
if
take care of
someone
it.
wants to make the motion, I can hand them this and they can
Okay.
read it off there.
Okay, so as you're starting to read this full page of small print, I
This
guess.
is my friend Ford talking to
As
me,
long
I
as,
think.
as long as, under 3B, under TBD, that would be for the inspection, for the bond amount to be set by staff for site work component. And the rest of it's as written.
Very good. Ready? Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact, final subdivision plan, and site plan review for FHT Varney Heights LP, CO Tim Gooch, for a 42-unit affordable housing development on Varney Road, portion of tax assessor map 23, lot 55, 0 Lower Main Street, recording plat dated TBD, to be built substantially as proposed, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport subdivision ordinance and Freeport zoning ordinance with the following conditions of approval. 1, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives at Project Review Board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. 2, the final signed copy of the recording plan shall be recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds within 90 days of the date upon which the plan is signed, otherwise the plan shall become null and void. 3, prior to any site work, including but not limited to clearing of the site, and prior to the issuance of any building permits, the applicant do the following. A, establish a performance guarantee in the amount to cover the cost of all site work associated with the project in the amount to be determined by staff in a form acceptable to the town attorney. The performance guarantee, in accordance with Article 12.9 of the Freeport subdivision ordinance, shall cover the cost of all site work, including the access drive, erosion control, stormwater management, landscaping, etc. Along with a performance guarantee, a non-refundable administrative fee at the rate established by the Freeport Town Council to be paid. B, establish an inspection account, the amount to be determined by staff to cover the cost of site inspections of the site improvements by the town engineer. C, the developer have a pre-construction meeting with the town planner and town peer review engineer. D, the applicant shall provide the town with digital file in a format compatible with the assessor's records containing the information shown on the recording plan. E, enter into a maintenance agreement for a stormwater management system with the town of Freeport to be recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds with yearly stormwater reporting to the town of Freeport being required. F, the applicant obtain final review and approval of the proposed stormwater management and erosion control plans by the town's peer review engineer. G, final legal documents pertaining to the affordable housing development provisions be reviewed and approved by the town attorney. Item number 4, prior to the sale of any units/lots, the applicant shall provide the town planner with a letter from a professional land surveyor stating that all monumentation shown on the plan has been installed.
Add a 5 for those 2 items.
The 2 that are highlighted? Yes. Okay. 5, third-party enforcement. The EUA identifies Maine Housing as a third-party enforcer. As part of its approval, the PRB shall expressly approve Maine Housing to be the third-party enforcer. And any amendments to the EUA required by Maine Housing, see EUA paragraph 4, should be reviewed and approved by the town to ensure that the affordability standards remain in place. Such amendments must also be executed and delivered to the town. And then I think there was a 6, which was Todd's point on lighting, that the photometric plan be updated to reflect addition of lighting to the sidewalk.
Is there a second?
Do you want to hear more, Jim, or what?
No, I don't want to hear more.
Second.
Any discussion?
I think 2 points. One, in terms of the date of delivery of documents, like, it sounds like the condition is just that they provide documents. I think we need to add some kind of timeline to that date. And second, as to the issue of lighting, I think I agree with the notion of lighting, but I'm concerned about making that a condition, given we haven't talked about anything about the substance of its location or its nature. So imposing that as a strict condition without certainty of how that gets enforced, I think is a concern.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the way it is. Yeah.
So just strike the lighting requirement?
No, I'd say keep it
Or
in.
just leave it as is?
Leave it as it is. I'm comfortable with that.
Understand. I disagree.
Can it be added, given to us after the fact for review as part of that, that additional statement, on the end of it? Give it, presented upon, discussion to the board if, even if it's after.
How about if we
Final
delegate it
plat.
to staff?
There we go.
Okay, delegate.
So we have exterior lighting standards in the zoning ordinance, so,
okay with
yeah,
that.
if there was an updated, like, photometric plan that came in, staff could review it. Typically, there are allowances for minimal lighting to be staff approved anyway, I think in 602 of the ordinance, so I think it's in line with that, as long as it didn't, cross any boundaries of what's allowed by the exterior lighting section in the ordinance.
So just adding to that
I'm okay
condition
with
to be reviewed and approved by staff.
Second.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll call a vote. Berger,
Yes?
Donahue,
Yes.
Hamlin,
Yes.
Madeira,
Yes.
Monteleone,
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Second agenda item is AEC Engineering, 172 Main Street, for addition to an existing building of 2,500 square feet in size with a change to the and formalization of the parking. Why don't you fill us in, Kyle?
Yeah, so the applicant had come forward last month for a conceptual meeting for this building addition and parking expansion. So we're in the Industrial 1 district. Board mentioned it's a 2,500 square foot building addition. The applicant had noted needing some additional space to expand their business. So we talked a little bit last time about that the existing building doesn't meet the current setback requirement in the district. It's an existing legally allowed nonconformity. The applicant has shown on the full site plan here that they will continue to, at the very least, to meet that same setback that is already in existence, which is allowed under our nonconformance ordinance language. In fact, I believe the building addition will be a couple feet behind where the existing building is. As far as the parking area goes, there's another kind of slight existing condition nonconformity there. So the part of this project is the applicant formalizing the existing parking area with some restriping. So you'll notice where there's the kind of 2 rows of parking on the left side of the parking area. They've delineated the parking spaces out to meet the requirements of the off-street parking ordinance, the 9 by 18 and a half feet. Did leave the travel aisle at 23 and a half feet. Typically, for a new parking area, we would require a 24-foot travel aisle. As this is an existing parking area that's just being formalized, and there isn't any expansion or increase to the nonconformity. We didn't see any issues there in terms of the ordinance. There would be, in terms of landscaping, vegetation, that sort of thing, we have 7 trees, I think, proposed to be removed. For the building addition, there is existing vegetation along the front property line and that side property line closest to the building addition, which would remain to allow some buffering there. And the applicant has proposed to manage stormwater on site. The town's peer review engineer did offer final comments that there were a few revisions to be made to the stormwater management plan in their initial comments that the applicant responded to. Final comments from our peer review engineer had no further issues identified. There's a roof drip edge filter and then an underground storage system proposed next to the parking addition. Other than that, I believe there's a couple exterior lights mounted on the building that are proposed. The applicant provided a photometric plan for that, so there were no issues regarding lighting there. Traffic to the site isn't proposed to be increased as the use is remaining the same, and we're not really talking about an expansion of employees. This isn't a use open to the public customers typically. As far as the parking calculation and application, we did get some follow-up material from the applicant. So originally, the application was framed as an office use and under a certain parking calculation. In talking with our code enforcement officer, we would be looking at this more as a manufacturing use with kind of like some accessory office within the building. The parking requirement for that is 1 space for each 1.2 employees. So the applicant would meet that requirement. Outside of that, I don't think I have too much more to add unless the board has some questions. I did include in front of your chairs when you came in the finalized proposed finding of fact for the stormwater finding. Because we hadn't received final engineering review when the staff report went out, we had left that finding blank. So if the board is ready to make a finding here this evening, I would just recommend including that in the motion. Other than that, turn it over to the board and applicant.
Anyone on the board have any questions for Kyle? Adrian?
Hi there. Adrian Fine, civil engineer, Teradyne Consultants, here tonight with the architect and the applicant for the project. We gave a pretty thorough presentation last time, so I'll just kind of go over some of the things that we finalized with the final design. The project remains the same as when we were here before. It is a building addition to AEC Engineering, approximately 2,500 square feet, and some expanded parking lot area with restriping of the entire parking lot. Some things to note are stormwater management. We did a full assessment of the site, looking at pre and post conditions, and we are proposing to treat stormwater with a roof filter, capturing all the runoff from the new roof, and then also piping some additional stormwater from existing roof from both of those to underground storage chambers, which will then release the stormwater slowly to meet peak flow requirements of the ordinances. That was all reviewed by the town's review engineer, and they signed off on it with their final review. We also provided a photometric lighting plan with the proposed building-mounted lights. We have 2 new lights on the front of the building over the doorways that are kind of mimicking what's on the existing building, also over doorways. And then there's also lighting on the side over a door. And so we provided that plan, and the cut sheet is right on the plan showing what the light fixture will look like, which is similar to existing lighting. And then the landscaping, like Kyle mentioned, we're really preserving the majority of the trees and the vegetation on the site, so there will be really no changes from Route 1 as you're looking at the site. Those trees will remain. And then where the building is going itself, trees will have to come down, but there will still be trees between the building addition and the property line. And I think, the other thing was the utilities. We did receive ability to serve letters from the water district and the sewer district that the existing utilities were sufficient and could remain. With that, I'll open it up to any other questions.
I have a question. Could you just point where the underground stormwater management area is that you
Yep.
described? That hatched area, or from here it looks hatched.
Yeah, so the roof filter strip runs the length of the building addition, and then there's some piping between there and that area off to the north of the parking that Bud just circled there. And that's completely underground. It'll be under lawn and not visible at the surface.
Thank you.
Others? Zoomers?
This is Jason. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question about the photometric lines. I see that the plans under the light fixtures is showing something on the order of 1 foot candle. That seems kind of low from what I normally see, like directly under a fixture. Could you say some more about the calculations on that, and if there's something unique about this fixture that keeps the lighting level that low?
Yeah, this is more of a fixture for lighting right at the entry. So part of it is also the 10-foot grid on these photometrics plans is sometimes not as nuanced to capture when you have this little light, few lights. But it is a lower level light to light the entries and the parking around it, and not, make this seem like a really, really bright industrial parking lot, because it is just for employees.
I mean, I think the notion of keeping the light levels fairly low makes a lot of sense. I just want to do a reality check on what those numbers are.
Any other questions? Any members of the public have any questions or comments? Kyle, if we get to a motion, my understanding is it would be as presented with the addition of accepting the proposed finding of fact E sub-water drainage is presented to us tonight, right?
Correct.
Is there a motion?
And just to, before we get there, to clarify on the PG amount for this one, we did have final review by the town's peer review engineer on the applicant's cost breakdown of the site work. So the way that 2D condition is worded now is to say in the amount to be reviewed and approved by the town. But we have done that review of that number. So the number is 41,925. So whether we want to leave it more general or include the exact number, I think that's either way would work.
And C would still be TBD.
Yeah, C we would still leave as to be determined.
You said it was 41,200, 425?
41,925.
925, okay. Okay. Well, I'll make a motion. If you're welcome, yeah. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact and site plan review for AEC Engineering for a building and parking area addition at 172 Lower Main Street, Tax Assessor, Map 8, Lot 7, to be built substantially as proposed, with the application dated 9/20/2024, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport zoning ordinance with the following conditions of approval. 1, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representative at the Project Review Board meetings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. 2, prior to the start of construction, the issuance of any building permits, the applicant does the following. A, the applicant obtain all applicable permits from the Freeport Codes Enforcement Officer and pay any applicable fees. B, the developer have a pre-construction meeting with town staff. C, establish an inspection account in the amount to be determined with the town staff to cover the cost of inspection of the site improvements by the town of Freeport. D, establish a performance guarantee in the amount of $41,925 to cover the cost of all site work associated with the project in the amount, let's see, we already said that, in a form acceptable to the town attorney. The performance guarantee shall cover the cost of all site work, including parking improvements, erosion control, stormwater management, landscaping, et cetera, along with the performance guarantee, a non-refundable administrative fee at a rate established by the Freeport Town Council be paid. E, final stormwater plans. You said those have been approved,
Yeah, that could be
so I don't need to say
removed,
that.
yeah.
E, enter into a maintenance agreement for stormwater management system with the town of Freeport to be recorded in the Cumberland County Registry of Deeds, with yearly stormwater reporting to the town of Freeport being required.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion by the board? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki. Yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
L.L. Bean. Hi, Kylie. Okay, Kyle.
All right, so I will keep my background on this one pretty short. I think everyone else here has more experience with this one than I do. But just a little general overview. So October 18th, 2023, the board had approved a design review certificate and site plan amendment for some facade modifications at the L.L. Bean flagship store on the Justin's Way side. So there is approval there for the design review certificate and site plan amendment. However, there is a condition put on that approval that the applicant come back with a site plan amendment to provide further detail on the landscaping with an updated landscaping plan and other facade details such as a trellis included. So that is why the applicant is now here, and that is why in the staff report you'll see that we have a very revised version of the proposed findings, because we are not looking at a full site plan amendment. We are only looking at the condition of approval that required the applicant coming back for the updated landscaping plan. So we've only included that proposed finding for the landscaping, as that's really the only one from the previous approval at the October 18th, 2023 meeting that would require updating based on the changes made. So the applicants provided that updated landscape and trellis plan, and I would defer to them to provide more detail on that. I did provide some background there in the report, whereas largely grasses were proposed at the last time. Now the applicant has added a number of trees to the area and the trellis to the facade.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm not going to do them here this evening. My name is Kylie Mason from Sebago Technics. I'm just here to return for the two conditions of approval.
Should be.
Oh, it is. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks,
yeah,
Kylie.
should be good. Sorry.
One for the trellis as requested, the second for the enhanced landscaping as discussed. So we appreciate the time in between our last approval and coming back tonight. This gave us the time to make sure we were really on the right track and that everything was progressing and that we did not need to come back with any further adjustments. And so, as you'll notice, officially mine. All right, So what we've included is a much more robust landscaping plan, includes a number of trees, as Kyle described. It does enhance the grasses that are there. We have an understory of evergreen that'll go along the foundation of the building. We did include a detail of the trellis that will be placed. It's larger than what we talked about at the meeting last time, as you recall, but in line, I think, with your intentions and request. We've got some visuals to show what it will look like Photoshop during construction, shown on the rendering itself, and then with plantings at install height, and then with plantings at a 10-year height.
Is that where refresh my memory, is that where the trellis goes, where the X's are?
That is the trellis, yes.
That is a trellis. Okay, thank you.
And that's all. I'm happy to answer any questions.
The trees and shrubs shown are as when they're planted, or that's 5 years from now? or what's-
This is planted.
Okay.
This is 10-year.
I had my head down when you showed the first one, sorry. Good.
I only have so much Miracle Grow day one.
Looks good.
No questions?
Yeah. Was there any
Sorry.
sorry.
Jason, do you want to go?
Okay. It's more of an identification question, but the choice of service berry, could you talk some more about that and about the spacing? And I hadn't seen the 10-year growth plan, but it seems like that gets a little crowded with the evergreens. I'd just like to consider if that is going to work properly.
I mean, I can certainly include less plants, but the service berry was included because this is a heavily shaded area. So you have to plant it as though it's an understory, not a street with open sunlight. So you have to think about the shading of the building. Service berries are very tolerant of shade conditions. They are an understory tree. We're showing them at 10-year at their max potential height, quite honestly. Will they crowd the evergreens? I'd call it as they're going to knit together. Will you experience some form of crowding? I hope so. I think that's probably the best option for this.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
Linda?
This is maybe a silly question, but it's a trellis. Was there any consideration of allowing vines or anything to grow up there?
So this would be an architectural feature only. With the building being wood construction, we definitely would not encourage vines to grow on it. It would destroy the building.
Okay. I said it was kind of a silly question.
It's definitely not a silly question. It's a valid question. It's just the reason why.
The other question is, on this view, and I have to apologize because I can't decide whether I need glasses for far or near, but where the sidewalk goes up to the second electric light, electric pole, and it looks like, is that a hydrant over there, or is that a person? I can't tell.
It's a person.
Okay, because
It
I was
gives you
going
the
to
scale
say.
of the trees in relationship to a person.
Okay, and so that is a full walking sidewalk over there. I
That's
I
as
thought
it
it might have been
exists.
blocked by a hydrant or something.
No, that's as it exists.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just go?
My hand is raised.
Okay.
Lynn?
Can you?
Lynn, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say I love the trellis, and I think you were just asking about vines. I think the original thought was that there should be something to mirror that bank of windows towards the rear of the building, and not just have a big open space, and I think the trellis does it very nicely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Could you just go back to, you showed some other slides as kind of a refresher for us?
Yep. I'm going to get the right direction one of these
There we go.
days,
Okay,
Todd.
yeah, right there, just to help with perspective, because the trellis is there. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Further questions from the board? Members of the public?
Hello, I'm Carol Grimm. I have a feeling I'm a little late to this party, but if nothing else, I'd like to put the bug in your ear for future development in Freeport. I was startled to see the photos about 2 weeks ago of LL Bean near the hunting store. The exterior of the flagship that looks nothing like the premier outdoor retailer LL Bean that we know. The exterior design resembles more that of a big box retailer, shopping mall, or hotel chain. If you go to the Old Navy at the main mall, it looks very, very similar. Flagship stores are designed to showcase a brand's look and legacy. Beans has done this with their home and hunting store with exterior details and character. However, the newest design fails to deliver what our town needs, that main lodge character and quality craftsmanship that Beans is known for. LL Bean is the major draw, bringing foot traffic to the rest of our shops, businesses, and restaurants in town. With Bean's foot traffic numbers already reported down for the year, approving the stark exterior that doesn't embody that main lodge design would be a mistake. I'm hoping modifications to this design can still take place to increase foot traffic to LL Bean and our local shops and businesses. They desperately need those foot numbers to increase for a thriving future in Freeport. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure you understand tonight's agenda item is,
I did after I read the packet.
yep, well, thank you for your comment. Anybody else from the public? Any further discussion from the board? Is there a motion?
I'll read this one.
Okay.
It's short.
You're ready to go. Go ahead.
LL Bean, 95 Main Street, for a site plan amendment. Proposed motion, be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the...
Excuse us.
Can you folks do that in the hall? No, sorry, Dave.
Okay.
Unless you want us to not do the motion.
Proposed motion. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact and site plan amendment for LL Bean, Inc. for updated landscaping and facade plans at the flagship store at 95 Main Street, tax map 11, lot 64-ETC, to be built substantially as proposed, application date 11/6/24, finding that it meets the applicable standards of the Freeport zoning ordinance with the following conditions of approval. 1, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives at Project Review Board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. 2, all conditions of approval from past project approvals are still applicable.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion by the board? Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki. Yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Easthead Family Holding.
Sure thing. So we have an application by the Desert of Maine at 95 Desert Road for a site plan amendment. There are two components to this application. One is at a past approval on August 25th, 2021. The board had approved a site plan amendment that included some additional landscaping and fencing around the parking area. At the time, I believe the board did a site walk to go out and take a look at there. It was fairly close to an abutting property line at 93 Desert Road. So I imagine that there was some conversation there about needing that additional buffering to provide some screening. So currently, the property owner at 95 Desert Road now also owns the property at 93 Desert Road. So the different property owner situation that existed previously no longer exists. Top of that, the applicant had provided some photo evidence around the parking area to show that even without that additional landscaping and fencing that was part of that initial approval, there's still a fairly substantial wooded area providing some buffering around that parking area. The request there is, by the applicant, is to have that additional landscaping and fencing around the parking area be removed from the site plan. The reason that that needs to come to the board specifically is our nature-based and our overlay district has some buffering requirements. Natural vegetation and natural features are eligible to be used to meet that buffering standard. However, that standard, that section 428F1 in our zoning ordinance does allow the board to ask for, ask for additional buffering on top of the natural features. So because at the time that August 2021 meeting, the board required additional landscaping and screening, it's really the board that would have to go back and approve an amendment to that plan to not include that landscaping and fencing. So that's the first request there. The second request is the applicant is looking to add 2 additional campsites to the campground. These would be 2 more of the geodesic domes. I believe in the application talks about these being footprint-wise roughly 300 square feet of impervious area. Overall, campgrounds are required to have 5,000 square feet of lot area per campsite. The site, being many, many acres, still meets that standard and threshold for the, I believe, 31 campsites now proposed at the site. There would be minimal earthwork for the campsites, so staff did not have any concerns about further stormwater or erosion control considerations there. The applicant was not proposing any tree removal as part of the 2 new campsites. They would be in areas already cleared and able for those to go in. So happy to answer any questions that the board has, but it's really 2 requests here that the applicant's looking for.
Just a clarification on what you said, because this came up with another campground.
Okay.
The 5,000 square foot, as we all agreed, the other event was per site, not an average of all the sites. So each site needs to have the 5,000 square foot minimum. Is that?
My understanding that code enforcement's interpretation is that there aren't lot lines drawn out on a campground plan like a subdivision might have where each lot has the 5,000 square feet. It's that overall on the site, there needs to be the total acreage to account for 5,000 square feet times the number of campsites.
That's counter to where we ended up on this other one.
Yeah.
So maybe Caroline could provide some further detail, but it was my understanding that code enforcement had interpreted it to be.
And then we reinterpreted code
Okay.
enforcement,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
is what happened. So.
Yes, that was the interpretation. It did come up with another campground. That was the interpretation of code enforcement, and we did have the applicant in the other situation go back and demonstrate that they had the overall area, but it's not drawing lines around individual campsites. Neither of the existing campgrounds, or we have multiple, have had it that way. I do believe in this case, over time, they've actually had a substantial decrease in the number of campsites from where they originally started, but they would still need to show that they have that 5,000 square foot of area, which I think, isn't your site like 20 acres or something? It's very large. 50, okay, close. I got almost half. So I do think they would meet that 5,000 square foot area. We did flag, as a side note to that conversation, I know we had some things we flagged in the campgrounds that we flagged for the planning board to look at in the future and clarify, and that is on one of the things on their work plan.
So I guess I'm a little confused on.
Yeah, I am too, because I thought when we left, we had approved that other, and not about this site,
Yeah.
but the other one, that we had told them they needed to come back and only go where each site was 5,000 feet. And I think as a board, we were
They
pretty
had,
unanimous
yeah,
on
the
that.
way, there was a condition added that they had to show that they had 5,000 square feet, which overall they do, but it doesn't include drawing an individual lot at each campsite.
As part of that prior application, can we send that question to legal review?
We
To
had-
go from the code officer's interpretation to like a more formal legal opinion about that?
You guys approved it with a condition that they demonstrate it to be approved. You didn't request a legal opinion, but again, we could revisit that with the planning board and do that again at that time. But with
So,
regards to this application, they could demonstrate, but again, we've never been drawing individual lot lines ever around the campsite itself. We haven't been making invisible property lines.
I'd like to add something. We actually did draw those lines because we thought that was the requirement.
Doug, could you go up to the microphone?
Introduce yourself, Sir Doug.
Hi, I'm Doug Heastan, owner of the Desert Domain. We were under the impression that we had to draw those lines. So we had our civil engineer draw lot lines. So we could demonstrate that pretty easily. I guess what I'm saying is this could be moot for this one.
well, I think
I
if it's.
think it is,
if-
but I think
if
we
it's-
should revisit the other one.
Yeah, if it's something that we had talked about and staff took a different direction from a very deliberate discussion that we had, then I think we do need to revisit that.
So we could revisit that. I would suggest we do it separate from this application.
That's fine. We just want consistency, so.
So to apply what you just said, Caroline, we need 5,000 times 33 units in the aggregate, which is 4 acres, and Doug's got 50.
And at the same time, Doug's saying each of his
We
lots
could
is
go into
5,000
technical
too.
minutia about roads and parking and driveway and all these other things, but given the math, I think there's adequate area
Okay,
buffer room for that.
thanks.
And again, just to clarify, I think Doug also said, and he meets 5,000 per site
Anyway.
also.
okay.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I'm here for any questions about these two requests.
Is there you don't have a computer, is there a full site map that we can look at where these are positioned? I only have,
I can pull it up on a computer.
They are, it's in the packet, Linda.
which I, didn't bring everything.
I can pull, if you don't have it, I can pull it up.
Let me just pass it down there,
Well, I was going to just pull it up.
if you can.
See that?
Which ones are we talking about?
That's these two at the bottom. These are all the existing, and that's adding this one and this one.
I wasn't that concerned about where they were. I just wanted to see it up on a.
Did you see it?
Yes. We looked.
Okay.
And I have one or two other questions when,
Did you
were
have
you going to
anything to add?
present anything?
Doug, did you have anything to add to Kyle's comments before we ask you a question?
Not really. From our perspective, it's pretty straightforward. There's just 2 extra campsites, and these are likely our last 2 that we'll be adding to the campground. And then what he said about the buffering, I don't actually think that this came up during the site walk. It's just something that our landscape architect added. And then when we went to go build it, it just seemed unnecessary. We actually had a conversation with the previous owner, and they agreed. So it's just kind of it would detract. We think it would be difficult to plant in a really where it is because it's already wooded quite thick. So it'd be hard to get anything to take there, and we don't think a fence would look good. It's just already buffered and by the existing vegetation. So,
And if I understand this correctly, if if you had owned the abutting property when you first came in, this buffering would not have been required. Is that right?
I don't know if the standard, if it was a separate lot still, but owned by the
Same
same
corporate.
property owner, I mean, the board, I think, could have still required a buffer. I'm not sure, why they
Okay.
necessarily would do that, but technically, I think they could. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't recall, and I don't have my notebook from before as to why we got to that buffer requirement, but I'm pretty sure we really talked about the construction of the parking lot over there and what we thought would be needed, and the owner of the property, the original owner of it, or the prior owner of the property, I think was concerned about having something over there. I would like to have seen, you have pictures in what you presented that are in full summer leaf out, and I would love to see what it looks like now, but I'm not suggesting that we go further and go out for a site walk, because I think we've kind of passed that. But I think it would be interesting to see the difference in the leaf cover. But my real question has to do with the fact that you've purchased this property. And I'm not trying to be facetious, but is there any clause in there that you can't sell it to anybody else? Because if it was sold to another owner and they came back and said, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of lighting, onto our property from the parking lot, I think that is possibly some of the reasoning that we had at the time. So to just say now you own it and it doesn't really matter anymore, I'm a little bit concerned about removing these requirements because of nobody knows the future, unless you're going to put in something into your deed that says it can't be sold to anybody.
There's nothing like that, and I appreciate the question. I will say that there was no concern from the previous neighbor. I've talked extensively with that previous neighbor. And there's no line of sight from the parking lot where the buffering was put in by the landscape architect to their house. It's the only thing on the other side of that is Desert Road. And there's no house on the other side of Desert Road, and there's a big gully that protects it regardless of any deciduous trees that may lose their foliage in the fall. There's a big hill on one side, and on the other side, it's a stand of eastern white pines that's really thick, so those don't lose their needles in the winter either. So you can't even see the house from either location where the buffering was put in.
I'll share that I do remember from the sidewalk, there's a woman who owned that house, and she said she didn't have any concerns about the buffering.
So I would just quickly add to, Linda, your point, that's exactly why, just because, the two properties might be in the same ownership, that standard would still apply because, right, site plan approval is run with the land, so property owners can change, so those standards and things could still be relevant just because a property owner happens to be the same at any given point in time. That being said, what Doug is saying, and I think what that ordinance standard around buffering says, is it's not even just specific to trees and vegetation. It's pretty clear that it's all natural features. So you do take into account things like hills and gullies and elevation changes and things like that. So I do think, aside from the idea that the property owners are now the same, that there's other justification that the board could still use.
And really the only reason we included that they're the same now is we're commenting as the property owner on the other side, not to suggest that we'll always, these two will always be owned under the same, entity. But there is no one else to really comment from the other side.
Any other questions? Thanks, Doug.
Yeah.
Any discussion?
Good.
Any questions or comments from the public? If there's no further discussion from the board, Lynn and Jason, no discussion?
Nope, I'll move it.
Okay, thank you. You'll have to read it Do you have?
Okay, it's short. Is there a second?
You have to read it, then we'll second it.
Oh, okay, sorry. Proposed motion, be it ordered that the Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact and site plan amendment for East Stand Family Holding LLC for the site plan amendment to remove the need to construct a previously approved landscape buffer and fence, as well as the addition of 2 campsites to each house a geodesic dome at 95 Desert Road. Tax Assessor Map 22, Lot 8, to be built substantially as proposed, application dated 10/7/24, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport zoning ordinance with the following conditions of approval. 1, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and their representatives at Project Review Board meetings and hearings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. Prior to construction, the applicant obtain any applicable permits from the Freeport Codes Enforcement Department. 3, the conditions of approval from past approvals are still applicable.
Thank you, Lynn. Is there a second?
Second?
Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thanks, Doug. ENR Properties, 140 Main Street, Kyle.
All right, so ENR Properties LLC at 140 Main Street might be better referred to as the structure where Tuscan Bistro is located. This property is located in the Village Commercial 1 district, so we're in the Design Review District. It's a Class C property. The applicant is looking to do some exterior modifications to the building that triggered design review. Primarily, they are looking to replace 8 windows in the kind of center portion of the building, and then add an exterior light to match the existing building lighting over each of those windows. So this is coming forward because the style and the size of the windows is a little different. So the windows that would be going in are larger than the existing. They also have a grid pattern to better match the existing windows around the restaurant portion of the building, whereas the windows being replaced do not have any sort of grid or muttons involved. So with that being said, it's a pretty straightforward project. The applicant provided some photos to illustrate the proposed windows to go in, the windows to be removed, as well as the windows on the existing restaurant portion of the building to show that kind of consistency in style. The one other change to note that the applicant is looking to do is there's an existing small awning over a doorway that the applicant plans to remove and replace with one of those windows. So that entranceway is just no longer needed, and that small roof awning would be removed. That portion of the building would be a window with a light over it, similar to the other stretches of the building that exist and are being modified as part of this application.
Is that photo 4 that you're talking about, the doorway with the awning?
Let me pull it up real quick.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
There you go. So, yes, yeah, the circle over that awning.
Just out of curiosity, is the restaurant expanding down there? Is that the reason for this?
If the applicant wants to speak more to that. I will say that that's not part of the application that's in front of us. But
not part of the application at this time. I'm Bob Bolin. I'm the COO for Maine EPM. So, quite possibly. We're in the process of figuring that out. We underwent an interior, not really probably very noticeable renovation earlier in the year where we expanded our kitchen space for a variety of reasons and updated most of our kitchen equipment, which had become quite antiquated. And so we're sort of gearing up for the potential of expansion. But we don't have a definitive plan for that yet, at least definitive plan for expansion of the dining room.
I'd say that in that area, if future application, if that were to come forward, there is provision in the ordinance on the site plan side to allow the conversion of retail space and restaurant space in the VC1 at the staff level. So just so the board's aware that unless there was something specifically that triggered coming to the board, a change of use of expanding the restaurant into that space may not come to the board in the future, but if it was a staff approval, it did qualify for that, we would let you know in the staff update portion.
Thanks. I don't have any questions. Anyone have any questions for the applicant? Lynn or Jason, any questions?
I just wanted to say I think it's a nice direction, and I would support both the windows and the removal of the flat roof awning piece not being a key feature to the architecture. And it's really interesting how this building has changed and adapted itself and become better slowly over time. So it's a nice forward step.
Thank you.
Any members of the public? I'll make a motion. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact and design review certificate for E&R Properties, LLC, for exterior alterations to replace windows, add light fixtures, and remove a roof awning at 140 Main Street, Tax Assessor Map 13, Lot 19, to be built substantially as proposed with the application dated 10/29/24, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport Design Review Ordinance with the following conditions of approval. 1. This approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plans submitted by the applicant and the representative at the Project Review Board meetings on the subject application to the extent that they're not in conflict with the stated conditions. And 2, prior to the start of construction, the applicant will obtain any applicable permits from the Freeport Code Enforcement Officer. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Berger.
Yes?
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
Yes.
Reiki. Yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last item is Great Cabin 8 Inc., 80 Main Street.
All right, so a little more background for this one. We have a bit of a unique application here that the board might be entirely used to. So this property is currently used as a bed and breakfast in the Village 1 district. It's also within the Design Review District and the Freeport Village Overlay District. So bed and breakfasts over a certain number of rooms are a use that requires site plan approval. So in the report, I broke this down into 3 portions of review that the board is potentially eligible to do, or that this project would fall under. So first, to kind of talk about the use a bit and the site plan amendment piece, because some public comment came in. I think everyone on the board saw. I just want to clarify this. So the application for this, I believe, 64 square foot sauna and 80 square foot changing room, in addition to the cold plunge and fire pit in the rear of the B&B, initially came in. The applicant was looking to have this for guests of the B&B as well as members of the public attend. In conversation with the applicant, we discussed, the site plan amendment process by having this be open to members of the public. That would be a new use introduced to the site outside of what the B&B is approved for, because the B&B definition, is really for, things where you have guests of the B&B involved. The applicant, we had talked about the idea of looking at this use specifically for guests of the bed and breakfast, and not open to members of the public, in which case, in conversations amongst staff with code enforcement, we talked about this being viewed as an accessory use to the B&B, where these features in the backyard, the sauna, cold plunge, changing room, would be considered an accessory use of the B&B, as in it would be an amenity for the guests of the B&B. With that in mind, based on the proposed square footage of all the components being proposed here, the sauna, changing room, it's under that 1,000 square foot threshold that would potentially allow for staff approval on the site plan side of things. So I want to clarify that the application here is not for a site plan amendment at this time. Okay, so moving on to design review. This property falls within the design review district. One component of design review is that if a project is not visible from the public right-of-way of a right-of-way within the design review district, that design review standards and a design review certificate is not applicable to the project. The final area of review that this property would fall under is the Freeport Village Overlay District. That Village Overlay District requires that certain projects, in this case, it's a property that has a site plan that's along a public road. So if work is done on a property like that, under the Village Overlay, the property would need to obtain a design standard certificate, not to be confused with the design review certificate that we typically hear about in the design review ordinance. But it needs to have a design standard certificate from the PRB, approved by the PRB, to meet those eligible standards outlined in the Village Overlay Ordinance. So it looks at things like architecture, building features, roof pitch, stairs, porches and decks, landscaping, things like that. So in this case, a lot of those aren't applicable to the project, but there are a few there that do apply. So really, why we're here and what we're looking at with the board and what the applicant is asking for is an application for that Village Overlay Design Standard Certificate, and part of that involves a waiver request for one of those Village Overlay Design Standards. One of those design standards is to require that buildings have a certain roof pitch between 6/12, 12/12. So as you can see in the application, the proposed sauna and changing room structures do not meet that roof pitch requirement. They're relatively flat roofed structures. The Village Overlay Ordinance does allow the Project Review Board to waive certain standards in the overlay. And I included the language in the staff report, should the waiver not jeopardize, the public health, welfare, safety, should it not be, go against the town's comprehensive plan and intent of the zoning ordinance and things like that. So the idea here is that the board would be reviewing the project under the lens of the Village Overlay District standards, and that the next steps would be for the applicant, should they get the waiver and the design standard certificate approval from the board, they would then submit a site plan amendment application to staff for a staff approval, should the application still seem to meet that threshold of falling under 1,000 square feet of impervious area, and should the application specify that it only apply, or the use here, the sauna, the cold plunge, only be available to members of the B&B and not open to the public. Because that's important, because should it be open to the public, and would, if that was the stated application, then that would involve a new use, and it would be a different level of review, at the very least staff review board, if not project review board. That's not something that staff approval, we could approve at the staff level. So we do have, I had a recommended condition in there, number 2, that talked about prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant obtain staff approval. I would offer, if the board got to the point this evening of looking to make a motion on this, I would recommend altering that number 2 to say something to the effect of, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicants submit the necessary information for a site plan amendment, which, based on previous discussion with the applicant, would be only for the proposed use to be available only to guests of the B&B. I think it's a little unclear on the application form that the applicant submitted at this stage. They reference B&B guests and potentially community members, but these follow-up conversations led us to the idea that it would only be for B&B guests, but we would want that clarified by the applicant if they were going to take that next step of applying for the site plan amendment and trying to get staff approval.
So that, there's some ambiguity initially, but it is absolutely clear at this point, this is guests of the B&B only.
Yes, so should the applicant take the next step after, if the board approved this design standard certificate and waiver request, the next step would be the applicant would need to have approval on the site plan side. So if the only way to get staff approval would be to limit the use to guests of the B&B only and not to the public. If the applicant wanted to move forward with a plan where the sauna area was available to the public as well, that would involve a change of use. We would need to talk with the code enforcement officer about what specific use that would involve, and that would involve a different kind of scale of site plan amendment that would have to either go to the staff review board or project review board for review.
And it changes zoning as well, correct?
Yeah.
It depends on what use, I think, code enforcement interpreted the activity to be, because I don't think it's 100% clear. But
May I ask a question? My hand is raised. I think where I got confused was the letter that the applicant wrote talked about a wonderful addition for their guests.
Yep.
Almost all of the letters written in support talked about a wonderful resource for the Freeport community. So it led me to believe that it was, open to anyone.
So-
But would not, if that were the case, if they did come back and want to open to anyone, doesn't that bring into question, do you have enough parking?
Yep.
Is the parking lot lit? I mean, it's a much bigger project on that basis. But you're saying right now, they're limiting it to the 6, 8, however many units they have, those guests only, correct?
Exactly. I think it was the applicant's initial intent to look at having it available to members of the public as well. And so when we were having those preliminary kind of conceptual conversations with the applicant, we talked about all that, exactly the things you brought up, that if you're introducing a new use, you're introducing the idea of potentially more off-street parking needed. And if you're adding parking spaces, then you're changing Even more so, the amount of impervious area going in, which could trigger stormwater modifications and all of that. So yes, it would be a much more substantial review that would be needed should the use change there and a new use, be sought. Whereas if it was limited to the B&B guests alone, that it would just be a continuance of the current use. There wouldn't be any anticipation of more traffic than already travels to the site, because it would just be the additional, or the current guests who are the ones using the area. And that's why it would stay within that, on the site plan side, that staff approval threshold potentially. But I do think, as you pointed out, that it was just a little unclear with some of the background materials as to what the specific intent was. I think in conversations with the applicant verbally, it was clear that they were, at least at the present moment, looking to have this available only for B&B guests. But should the board approve this design standards certificate, that there should be a condition put in place that for the site plan amendment portion that would potentially go to staff review, that all of that necessary information be clarified on that additional information in that application, so we can verify that it would only be for the B&B guests.
Just to put a lid on this.
At this time, yes.
There's nothing there's no action we're taking today which changes, which would open this to the public, and there's no way that this could be approved at the staff level for it to be open to the public. It would have to come back to us.
Correct. So what's in front of you right now, if you look at the application form, it's checked off as other for the village overlay, waiver and that design standard certificate. This is not an application for a site plan amendment at this time. If the applicant came forward tomorrow with let's say they got this approval and they came in and they were looking to get that staff approval for a site plan amendment, the only way we could staff approve that is if it was limited to the B&B guests. If the site plan application that came in tomorrow was to be open to the public, it would have to come back to the board.
Any other questions for Kyle before we ask if the applicant has anything?
I'm somewhat confused about what you just said. Yep. Because you said if they came back for a site plan approval, I understand what the technical term is now for a design standard certificate, we'd be doing this waiver with that. That's an all-encompassing term, right? So what would be, if they had to come back for a site plan approval, and it could only be for the residents of the users of the B&B, what could there be that would need site plan approval that would be different than what this already is?
So it's the site plan side would be looking at, so in that list in 602, in the zoning ordinance, it outlines what falls under site plan approval for the staff level, the staff review board, and the project review board. One of the things eligible, this would be an amendment to an approved site plan, right? They're adding something to this space in the rear yard that isn't shown on their current site plan that's approved for that site.
Isn't that what we're doing now?
No.
We're adding?
You're only looking at the village overlay design standards. So those design standards that I outlined in the report that are looking at, the architectural features of the buildings. So the materials used, the roof pitch waiver standard.
But it's not the same building. It's an added building now. Two extra buildings.
Yeah, so those buildings need to meet those village overlay standards, those design standards. So the site plan side of things would be looking at things like, is like the staff approval, like it says, you can only add 1,000 square feet up to of impervious area for building additions. So that's what we would be staff approving. And we would be making sure that those buildings, met setbacks, or the use being proposed in those buildings was allowed, and in which case, we would be looking at the fact that it was accessory to the B&B, so that it's just a continuance of the same use.
I have the same question because I just feel like we're going in circles. If they are adding some structures and the waiver is for the roof of those added structures, why are those added structures not under the more full definition of the other?
Because it's so small.
The only thing that's coming before you right now is the village overlay. So there's a staff approval mechanism on the site plan side. There is not a staff approval mechanism on the village overlay side. So there are two different ordinances. There are two different chapters in the ordinance. So like design review ordinance, for instance, has a staff approval mechanism, but this village overlay does not. So that's the reason that we can't just staff approve the roof pitch waiver. The only body that can approve the waiver for the roof pitch is the project review board. And the only bodies that can approve these design standard certificates, to meet these certain standards laid out in the report, the character, foundations, exterior walls, windows, doors, chimneys, all of those, is the project review board. And code enforcement can also issue those design standard certificates on projects that only require building permits. But as the planner, I can't staff approve one of those design standard certificates. The village overlay ordinance doesn't give me that authority. So that's why I said it's a bit unique, and we don't usually have these, where the applicant is only coming forward so the PRB can approve those design standards and that waiver request potentially, but then the rest of the project would fall under, on the site plan side, it would fall under the thresholds to be staff approved under the zoning ordinance. So,
Because one of my concerns is.
So has that gone through all across your desk at this point, Kyle, in terms of being approved, or what's the sequencing, or does it matter?
yeah, I think it does matter, because I couldn't staff approve a site plan amendment, even if it met those thresholds, if it didn't meet all of the standards of the village overlay. So that's why we're here first to get that waiver request figured out, if the board is willing to give that, and, to make sure that it meets all of those village overlay standards. Because, for instance, if the board didn't issue that roof waiver request, I wouldn't be able to approve at the staff level a site plan amendment, because the project wouldn't meet the village overlay standards.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Any other questions for Kyle? Kelly, did you have any comments?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I am appreciating this conversation. My name is Kelly Delaney. I am the owner and operator of the Brewster House right here in Main Street since 2016. And I appreciate everyone's thoughtful consideration of my request. I won't stand up here and act like I am the professional architect who has got renderings and has an engineering firm behind me. I've been working alongside town staff. I feel that in this day and age in Freeport, that an expansion of my business to be able to offer a really compelling and unique experience to an outdoor-centric destination would make a really big difference to my business. I don't have to tell you how hard it is to weather COVID and Airbnb and all the other dynamic, thank you, all the other parts of running a hospitality business in Freeport, not to mention the lack of restaurants and other things that we're all dealing with. I really feel that this very popular and really only growing trend of looking at your health and seeking out a travel destination where you can support your mental health, your physical health. You can connect with your spouse and your friends in an environment that's healthy and positive, would only be an attraction for Freeport. So I appreciate, and I'm sorry that the application seemed a bit confusing. This has been a very iterative process for me. Everything you said is right. Do I have dreams of having my community wrapped into this? Absolutely. And so that's where my supporters wanted to come to my aid, and they're excited about it, but they also have grown to understand that for me to get this off the ground, I need to limit it and limit it just to the inn. And my neighbors are here, and I've tried to reach out to them and show them the benefits of this, and I've pledged to work with them. I don't want this to be an eyesore. I actually was hoping they would partner with me in doing this, so it would be something in their backyard too, in theory. But I respect everybody's got a different opinion and their own, and they are entitled to it. So that's my thoughts, and if you have any direct questions for me, I'd be happy to answer, and I appreciate your flexibility as I work through the process.
Thank you. Any questions for Kelly?
So we were, as some of the materials that were submitted to us, we received the fit-up grant application.
Yes,
submitted.
thank you for bringing that up.
Were you, has it been approved? I mean, is that funding going toward to paying this project?
So the Fit Up grant was actually part of what really drove this forward, because I felt that I was checking off the boxes and was going to get some really valuable support, financial support for this to move forward. And my application initially was that whole idea of community and my cross-selling of the business and really supporting my off-season traffic that is so hard to get here in Freeport in the hospitality industry. So the Fit Up grant was provided. I was awarded it. I actually, because of the challenges in this iteration of trying to figure out what I can do and how do I do it, I actually it was taken away because I wasn't able to move fast enough for the criteria of the Fit Up grant. I hope to go back and reapply for it, but as of this point, I don't have it any longer.
Any other questions? I have a question for you, which is I think we've been through a couple times already, but I just want to understand. Any approval you get from this board would be limited for your guess,
Yes.
and that's the path you're on.
I am aware, and I do believe it's an attraction for visitors to Freeport, and the statistics tease out, and all I can hope is that Freeport continues to be a destination and that I can scoop up valuable business from that, and then also offering this unique experience.
For your guess.
For my guests.
Okay, sorry to keep doing that.
No,
but
I understand. I
confused
created
about
that
it.
confusion, and I apologize for that. I appreciate where that came from.
Great, thanks.
And I guess going to the specifics of the building and how
Yeah.
it looks, so the buildings are back from the road, they don't appear like they're visible from, was it Main Street?
Right.
Siding, I was unclear.
Yeah.
Your letter says cedar shingles all the way up the side of the buildings except for where you've got glass or openings, is that correct?
Yes, yes. All the different structures have a cedar-clad component to them.
So can I just push on the clarity on that? Because the picture shows that the changing room is like half shingles and half panel on the upper part. And I think the vocabulary, especially with the strength of the design of the sauna, is that you should have shingles on all surfaces, all the way up, from top to bottom to top.
Are you demanding it, or you're just saying you would advise that? I just want to understand.
I would vote for this if it was like that, and I would think twice otherwise.
Okay. The intent was to paint that portion of that op box to be, well, I will look into the cost of cedar clad for the whole structure.
Yeah, it can't be that much. It really can't.
Thank you.
No other questions for Kelly? Thanks. Oh, sorry, Jim.
So, I mean, I understand the need for a changing room when you're inviting folks from the general public. How about the need for a changing room when people are coming from B&B rooms?
Totally.
Feet away?
And not to say like, great, you read my mind, but frankly, that was part of the, like, well, is that really important? I did see it as a way to do some light catering. I've met with some other fellow innkeepers around Maine who also have saunas, and they've utilized a space as a kind of an area where folks can have a tea service. And so I saw it as a welcome area, not just a changing room.
A tea service for who?
For the guest. Some people like to have the experience where they're doing the sauna, the cold plunge, and then they have different artisanal teas and some light catering as a part of the experience.
So, bed and breakfast usage under Freeport ordinance is strictly limited to breakfast service only.
All right, we've had cookies in the past in the afternoon. That was,
So, no, but I mean, it sounds like we're talking about, okay, it's for, it just sounds like it's a moving target, I think is the concern that I have.
oh, I don't mean to confuse. There's some things that the industry has done for years, and I didn't think that that was somehow stretching the rules of acceptable food and beverage. So I respect that. If that was I don't know, I guess there's some givens in my industry that have happened, and I didn't question serving folks some hot tea. So I'll talk to Kyle about.
Yeah, I mean, all I would offer at this time is, the definition refers to breakfast shall be the only meal served and shall be limited to overnight guests. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into what counts as a meal or what's not. I don't.
That question isn't before us, but I mean, it's described as catering. It's described as, well, so, I mean, and really, we don't need to debate, I think, so.
I do think that would, I'm not sure it's like attached to the specific design application in front of us. If there's a bigger question, I think I would refer that to code enforcement for the existing use and what falls under the definition and of B&B or doesn't in terms of food and beverage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion by the board? We'll open up to the public.
I'm
in a
still
moment.
confused. I'm not going to go back to asking my same questions again, but I would like to ask a further question then about the proposed motion. The items that are suggested for us to use, I think they go beyond what I think we're talking about, unless I still don't understand what we're talking about. But we're not, I mean, why are we talking about, prior to issuing building permit? I understand that has to be done, but that's, not relevant to the waiver portion of this, I don't think. We're not giving a building permit. We're just doing a waiver of
Well,
one item in particular.
It's the waiver and a design standard certificate overall. The design standard certificate involves meeting all of those standards that I outlined there in the report. So it speaks to the exterior walls, like Jason mentioned. It speaks to, a lot of those aren't applicable because of the smaller scale of this project, but there is more there than simply the waiver. The conditions are really just to enforce, like on all of our other approvals, that this approval, if there was one by the PRB, wouldn't allow for just the applicant to go out and start working on this project right away. There's still a couple additional steps. There's the step of needing to obtain the site plan amendment approval whether that's through the staff approval level or if the scope of the use was opened up to, try to be to the public, then coming back to the board. And then prior to the issuance of, prior to the start of construction, obtaining any building permits. So again, that's not something that's being reviewed by the board necessarily. It's just to reinforce to the applicant that this approval is only for this very specific thing and that there's still these other steps in the approval process that would be needed before, getting to any point of construction. So for instance, if there was an ADA conversation, that would be happened with the code enforcement officer prior to getting a building permit. If there was, if we needed clarification in writing that this use would only be available to B&B guests, that would happen at the site plan staff approval level. So that's why those two conditions are there. And then the fourth one there, sorry if that was what you were speaking about, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant provide additional detail regarding the retaining wall. There is a specific retaining wall standard in the Village Overlay District that has certain dimensions and materials that the retaining wall needs to be constructed from. So the applicant referenced the retaining wall on their drawing. So because that piece specifically falls under the jurisdiction of the Village Overlay District, that condition was, we recommended that one, that the applicant follow up with some additional clarity on what materials that retaining wall would be to make sure it met the standard in the Village Overlay Ordinance.
Any other questions?
Are you looking for comments too, or?
Yep.
So from my point of view, I'll just throw it out there. I mean, it seems to me that the key issues for us are, is it really fit within the property in that it's not in the direct site of Main Street where these buildings or structures would be? That seems okay to me. It seems like there's shrubs and a commitment to do screening, which would add to the privacy of that area, and I would think the guests would want that kind of privacy back there. So it, in my mind, it sort of meets the visually compatible with the requirements of the Village Overlay District where it's removed and back away from the primary building. And along the same lines, the waiver for the roof line, I think these structures fit, and again, they're not really visible from anywhere within that Village Overlay District. So, my comments.
I want to raise one thing. We received a number of written comments, many in favor, but 4 specific concerns were raised. I'm not sure if members of the public are going to speak tonight, so I'll address them now. My understanding from talking to Kyle is that some background on these 4 issues are as follows. Open to the public, we've talked about that. This is not, as approved and proposed, it is not open to the public beyond members. There's a question raised about the fit-up grant, which is beyond our purview. There was a question raised about whether this plan is at odds with the electric permit plan, and my understanding from Kyle is the process has evolved, and both they're not inconsistent.
Yeah, so my understanding is that, there was an electric permit that came in that had a proposed sketch of this project area, and even, our initial conversations in the planning office with the applicant started out with a different layout of these proposed structures in the rear of the property. After our conversation with the applicant, talking about the standards of the design review ordinance and the Village Overlay Ordinance, it got to the point and it evolved to this current layout where the structure shifted more directly behind the B&B in a different layout. So the reason for that change and any discrepancies in other documents was that there were conversations based on the design review and overlay to kind of aim to go to those visual compatibility standards and efforts to screen the structures better from any view from Main Street. And also, it's not just Main Street, at least the side of Chapel Street that goes there is also in the design review district. And you might be able to see into the side of the property there. So that was the reason for the different layouts.
Thanks, Kyle. And the fourth one was, there was a question raised about tree removal, and my understanding is that was in CMP's right away.
Yeah, so again, I'm not aware of any proposed for the site. If there was tree removal, something we could look into.
Want to speak to that?
But yeah, I'd be happy to. But in speaking with code, our initial thought was that it was in the right-of-way part of the CMP project to put the utility pole in, not on the property.
Just really quickly, my neighbors are correct.
Wait till you get to the mic, Kelly.
Sorry. With regard to CMP, they actually came out and apologized and are offering additional vegetation because what I was told as a mid-span pole addition was only going to be limbing of existing trees. They hired out a company and they did it when, I didn't get a heads up, I wasn't given approval, and they removed a tree. And now CMP is coming back and replacing them. They can't replace a full-grown, my gosh, why am I blanking? Pine, but they do acknowledge that they erred and are making restitution.
Thank you. I don't raise those in any way to chill public comment. I just wanted to know that we've checked into it. Is there any members of the public who have any comments?
I'll speak.
Hi, my name's Sarah Kelly, and I'm a resident of Freeport and a friend of Kelly's. And I've seen the structures myself. I was one of the people who wrote in excitement for the community offering that could, be long down the line. And this, to me, really is about this board's commitment to, honoring an entrepreneur's efforts to improve her business. I really think that she's engaged in this process throughout, obviously through all of the iterations, which has provided some confusion and some conversation tonight about, the different details. She's landed on something that will allow her to move this concept forward within her existing business. And I think that it's really, authentic to offer something that's health-minded. Allow her to prove this out as a business owner, to see what it's like to run a sauna, and cold plunge operation for her guests. And I hope that this board can see that an entrepreneur, has every opportunity within the hospitality industry to, offer something unique. She's tenacious in continuing to learn from this process. And so I just hope the board can really be pro-entrepreneurial business owner in Freeport and really set that precedent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No hands on Zoom.
No one on Zoom?
Here we go.
My name is Gordon Hamlin. I live on Chapel Street. I've lived there for now over 50 years. And my wife Judy and I have raised two wonderful daughters living on Chapel Street. And our concern is that with that kind of improvement to the property, and I respect the fact that the owner wants to provide other amenities, is just Chapel Street is so quiet. And I'm concerned that if with a splash pool and a sauna, it's going to be very noisy down there. There's already a trampoline that's on the backside away from Main Street and very close to Chapel Street. That's used by kids. I don't know if they're your family or what, but it does disturb us from that perspective. And that's why Judy and I are concerned about this project, that it would be very disruptive to an area that we have enjoyed immensely for many, many years. And I believe that the Village 1 ordinance, zone does not permit this particular use at this time.
Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you.
Can you speak to whether this is permitted or not?
So in terms of use, so that's kind of what we're talking about with the difference between whether it's for just guests of the B&B or if it's open to the public would determine, you know, what use we're looking at here. When it's in a situation where it would be just guests of the B&B, in talks with code, we would be looking at this as an accessory use to the B&B. So it would still fall under that bed and breakfast use, just like if a hotel had a small fitness area in the hotel, you wouldn't be separately permitting that as a gym, separately as a gym. It would still be a hotel. There's just some components of there that are accessory to the hotel. So in this case, these amenities being solely for the guests of the B&B, we would look at it as an accessory use to the B&B, as the B&B is still the primary use of the site. Now, if the applicant was looking to have it open to the public and made that application, then we would need to determine exactly what land use the town would consider the activity, whether it fell under a recreational use, which, right, might not currently be allowed in the zoning district, or whether it fell under, we do have a business and professional office use in that district that's allowed, which doesn't seem like it would fit that. But if you look at that definition, it allows things like barber shops and beauty salons to fall under that definition and isn't just limited to those. So I think we would have to have a separate conversation at that time around that area. But as currently proposed with it, you know, the direction being to have it limited to B&B guests, we would look at it as an accessory use to the B&B, which would be allowed.
Yeah, we're not going to those other places.
Not tonight.
And if there were a noise problem, I mean, I appreciate the fact that if a B&B is permitted there, things that you typically see or frequently see in a B&B kind of are permitted there as well. If noise were a problem, how does that get addressed?
Yeah, so that should be an enforcement issue rather than, I mean, just as if the, you know, take away this whole idea of what's happening here, what's proposed here. If the B&B or if any other property, if a single-family residence, you know, was inviting people over and having parties every night in the backyard, because if a single-family home proposed this same sauna in their backyard, it wouldn't be coming to the project review board. It would just be a building permit, probably.
Okay,
So if any noise violation or noise disturbance to the neighborhood was happening like that, that should be an enforcement issue. We would definitely encourage people reaching out to code enforcement to kind of explore the nuisance that was being created, and we would address it with property owners from there.
And this would this be enforced, I assume, with a lower threshold than if it were on Main Street or something, in the business district?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what our like decibel limits are per district. But yeah, it would follow whatever noise requirements we have for the district.
Any other questions for comments from the
I have a
board?
question about lighting. I don't recall that there was any description of any additional lighting around this area. Seems to me that you might have that needed, because if there's use at night, you want people to be able to go out there and see what they're doing. But I also was wondering who would then approve that lighting, and what would that lighting be? If we don't have a chance to look at it, where do all of these other things come about for approvals?
Yep. So that would be on the zoning side, on the site plan side. So if this fell under a staff approval, we would look at that there. You know, under staff approval, there's allowances for small modifications to lighting. So we would look at it. If the applicant was just proposing, a ton of new lighting for this backyard, then staff would probably say, this is beyond the scope of what's allowed in a staff approval, and we would elevate it to the PRB for that site plan review. So there's a provision on the staff approval part of the site plan ordinance that allows things to be elevated to the PRB from staff if we see some issue. So if the applicant proposed a light right on the property line, for instance, and staff looked at it and said, that seems like it would be an issue, and we talked with the applicant and we said, hey, you should consider moving that, or it's going to create a nuisance or something. The idea would be either that the applicant address that and remove it from the plan, and then we can staff approve it still, or if they wanted to go ahead and propose that, then staff would probably elevate it to the project review board and have the PRB be the one to look at it. So that's typically how we look at those sorts of things. But I don't know, I also don't recall seeing any proposed lighting. I don't know if the applicant wants to speak to that at all.
The lighting that I've sourced so far has been temporary or initial because I've been waiting for the bigger project to even know that I can move forward. But my goal is very understated, very low lighting, certainly safe lighting. But again, with the screening and everything that we're talking about, this is about an intimate experience. This is not bright lights that you can see from Main Street. You're not getting hit with them in your eyes. This is modest, but cozy. And I don't, Linda, have like specifics to that because I've been waiting to see if we can even move forward. But it would certainly be something I'd be sharing with Kyle as the whole plan.
Yeah, so I'd just add we would, when we got to the next step, if we were there of looking to do a site plan amendment and it came and it looked like, okay, it's under that 1,000 square feet, this is something that I could potentially staff approve. We'd ask that lighting to be shown on the plan, probably the spec sheet, the staff approval, or whether it goes to staff approval, staff review board, or project review board, we're still looking at the same standards all the way. So it would still have to meet those exterior lighting standards in the zoning ordinance. And again, if there was some question then of whether or not it did meet that, then it would be probably a conversation elevated to the PRB.
Any questions from Jason or Lynn?
I think you got another comment?
I'm sorry. You go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Peter Taggart. I live at 7 Chapel Street. I'm a immediate abutter, and I'm probably the closest person to these buildings, even closer than the owners are. So it's of great concern. I was wondering why only the roof pitch is being discussed tonight and not the windows and doors. Don't windows and doors also come under the review board?
Yep. So those standards are outlined in the project review board's report. So yeah, those are windows and doors, the exterior walls, chimneys, yeah, there's a few other things in there that all apply. So if the board wants to comment on those, they are free to do so.
But they don't really have that information to comment on.
What do you mean they don't have the information?
Well, they don't have the full designs. They don't have the final designs.
The renderings and photos of the building are in the application for the board's review.
I see the photos of the sauna. The sauna is actually in place, so in terms of things not moving forward. But the other building, which looks to me like something from the Clam Festival vendor booth, I don't see how that really meets the standards.
Just to clarify, the photo is in the application of the changing room building on the same page of the photo of the sauna. Shows one rectangular door and one rectangular window.
There were a couple different sketches of those buildings. There was a stick drawing of, basically a framing plan.
So
it didn't seem like they all tied together.
So I'll just say the windows and doors section in the overlay ordinance says, modern technology has made possible greater use of glass in residential construction when compared with that of older historic structures. These standards recognize this development and encourage the liberal use of glass in windows and doors, including passive solar designs in the construction or renovation of dwellings. However, the placement, rhythm, framing, subdivisions, and shapes of doors and windows shall be visually compatible with existing residential patterns. In general, rectilinear window and door openings are the basic standard. Shapes of windows other than squares or rectangles are permitted, with the restriction that they may not exceed 2.5 feet in diameter, length, width, or height, and that their placement is limited in one such window per facade. These windows are not permitted in facades adjacent to those in which those shapes are already employed. So this section starts to go into windows that are not rectangular in shape. So it looked as though in the application that the proposed window and door on the changing room were rectangular in shape. We noted that in the staff report, but if the board wants to have further discussion there, you're more than welcome.
Okay, well, thanks for that clarification. I didn't have privy to the staff report. Is that actually a public document?
Yeah, it was included on the agenda materials.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed that.
That's okay.
I do think Peter hit the nail on the head there, that changing building is effectively incompatible with its partner building, being the sauna. The sauna being compelling in its own right. Granted, it's not a traditional vocabulary, but we're not talking about a house here. We're talking about something that's really no bigger than a shed. It's less than a shed. So I think given the strength of the design of the sauna needs to inform the resolution of what the changing building is, and they need to be more compatible with one another.
Thank you.
Hence your comment, Jason, about shingling top to bottom?
Yeah. Yes.
And I would echo what Jason said as well, that they should both be, I would think, at the same standard as the sauna building as well.
I concur.
Any other questions or comments, discussion?
So just to see where the board's at with that, is that something the board is thinking about making a condition of approval on, or something they want follow-up information from the applicant on?
I don't have a preference on that one.
Follow-up information is going to be, it costs a meeting to do that, right?
Yeah, I think we should find a way to approve this or not approve, however everybody else goes, but not defer.
So, I mean, if the board has a specific direction as to what they wanted to see on that building, then I think there could be a condition of approval that staff review the building plans. But we would just want specific, I think, guidance there around what the board was looking for with that building and the exterior wall.
I think we were saying the extension of the cedar shingling.
Okay.
Well, just more than that, because it's not just the extension of the cedar shingling, it's also the trim as well.
So,
so there's two different trim packages in the two different buildings. So I agree with what was said earlier, and I also agree with what Jason had mentioned too.
So I just want to bring up I already read one standard, why not read another one? So the exterior wall standard in the overlay ordinance, just so the board has the full picture. Exterior walls shall reflect the quality of performance. The use of traditional wood clapboard siding or simulated wood such as vinyl siding or composite materials with the appearance of wood siding is the basic standard. Vertical and diagonal siding patterns integrated into the overall building design are acceptable. Diagonal siding, industrial metal siding, standing seam metal siding, or asphalt shingle siding is prohibited. Windows, doors, and other openings in the wall areas shall be trimmed. Brick or stone masonry walls or partial walls are acceptable, but the employment of these features within the design must be carefully integrated to avoid the appearance of mid-20th century tract homes. I mean, I don't think we're
So
proposing-
maybe it's, because you asked, would we be ready to move forward with this? And maybe it is a condition that it would be similar to the sauna building, the same level of trim, okay, and consistent with that.
Yep.
Or it's not approved at this point, or they can come back.
Are these buildings pretty clearly visible from the abutters? That was a yes.
You guys are quiet down here.
Lynn?
If for something like a new drawing of the second building, the changing room, is that something that could be put before the board at their next meeting so that this individual isn't held up, but that we have an opportunity to see that the overall effect is what I think we're looking for?
I think the overall effect, Lynn, would be like the building, like the photo above the sauna is what's being discussed.
The photo above it? Wait a minute. No, or you mean the sauna building?
The sauna building doesn't have trim and it's shingle top to bottom.
And can
Right.
we let
Exactly.
staff be the ones that determines that the two become compatible? Rather than have to come back to us? That was a question for you.
Yeah, I think, it sounds like a couple people on the board want this to be shingle top to bottom. And I.
Well, it doesn't, I don't think it necessarily needs to be, but it, based on the information that's provided to us,
So I
you know,
think,
that is, we have two standards here. We have two different pictures here. And I think we're saying, well, these are the options that are presented to us. So that one is acceptable, that one is not acceptable. So there, maybe the applicant would want to come back with a Plan B or Plan C or something.
so I think the standard allows for, in the ordinance, for the appearance of wood siding is the basic standard, is how it's worded. So wood siding would be the threshold that the applicant would need to meet to meet the ordinance. So whether that was an exact match of the sauna or whether it was, done in some other way that maybe Caroline has.
It's a discretionary standard nonetheless, right?
Yeah, it is.
Correct? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not mandatory. I just want to clarify, Todd's comments, it doesn't say they can only use wood shingle siding. It gives a variety of options. But your point, can you go back to the standard you're pinpointing that the two structures need to,
Based on what's before us now, okay, when we're not going to
Cohesive,
we're not going to
we'll say.
get into designing, okay, that's not our job. But based on what's being presented to us today in the application, one seems to be somewhat of a consensus that is acceptable, and the other one is not. And so, based on this information, okay, I'm saying that we have an example of a design before us that yes, that is okay, the other one is not. If the applicant wants to come back with another option that, after listening to our comments, it could be different materials, it could be, then that would be fine. But right now, I don't think I would.
I just want to clarify though, the standard is there's many options made of wood. Aren't they both sided in wood? Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I don't know if.
So I just want to clarify
more
what
information on
standard
what
you're
the
going
material
to.
is for the upper
'Cause it-
part of the
like Jim
changing
said, it's not prescriptive, like you can only use this type of wood. There's a variety of options. So if we're going to require something, I just want to make sure we're tying it back to a specific standard.
Tying it back to what's presented to us now.
Right, but you're saying it's wood, they're both wood, which is a permitted material.
But they have different trim packages.
Okay.
Have different siding packages on them.
I think I guess Caroline's referring to is where in the village overlay
Yeah.
are we tying it to the fact that the two buildings are required to have the same?
Is there something in there about harmony?
So this isn't the design review ordinance, this is the village overlay ordinance.
Is
So
there visual compatibility in the village overlay district? Because that's all we're saying, is we want them to look compatible with each other. We're not trying, like.
It just doesn't make any sense.
To be clear, all
Right next
all the
to
materials they're proposing are permitted.
Yes, that's fine.
So there are two mentions of the words visually compatible in the village overlay ordinance. So one is in the windows and doors section, which I read before, where it talks about the shapes of the placement, framing, shapes of doors and windows shall be visually compatible with existing residential patterns. And the other is in the definition section of visually compatible. So there's not a mention of visual compatibility in, for instance, the exterior walls section, like there is in the windows and doors section.
I guess, Todd, I'd send you, we've had Kyle read a lot tonight. Maybe read character, is that kind of what you're getting at on page 8 of the?
I'm not able to pull it up right now. Where-
I'll read it. I have it. The architectural expressions of existing residential buildings in Freeport are predominantly those of historic styles dating from the late 18th and 19th and 20th centuries. There are notable examples of New England, Colonial, Federal, Greek Revival, Queen Anne, Gothic Revival, Italianate, shingle style, and simple farmsteads and maritime homes. Homeowners are encouraged to use any one style of this eclectic mix to aid in the design of their home. So I remember reading this previously. It does speak a lot to the design of homes, not necessarily to accessory structures in this section. In doing so, they are encouraged to incorporate the dominant features of the preferred style, and mixing dominant features of different styles is discouraged. For example, a federal fan should not be added to a colonial cape. Additions to existing homes shall harmonize with the existing original style of home and not introduce a competing style to the overall design. So I think it specifically references in that section at home, but whether we have the ability to extend that to accessory structures of the home.
So then I'm going to do one more thing, even though I don't get to sit up there tonight. I guess I'd go back to the applicant, because it sounds like on this application, the idea, started bigger and it scaled back. Their intent now is really to have something accessory to the B&B. So the people using that are staying there. So how important is the changing room? Is the changing room something you still feel strongly at this point that you need, or is it really the sauna?
Part of this, I will take it out.
That would be the other option, because that's what you guys are kind of stuck on, the differences in the two structures, correct? And if they're staying there, they should be able to, change inside. Not that I would want water dripping in my house, so I get it, but it was just a general question for you.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
One other alternative would be, if I'm reading the board correctly, you might get a couple more votes if the changing room didn't have white trim and were shingled completely. And I agree with Jason. I don't think it's a consequential difference in cost, but.
Well, and I would just like to add that I would like to take the neighbors into consideration, and if, in fact, they are visible, certainly the sauna, to my eye, is preferable. That particular outfitting of the outside of the building.
How do you feel about a requirement that the exterior of the changing room have the same treatment as the sauna?
That's fine. Like I said, I just didn't have an idea of how much the cost was or anything, so I was just.
It might get you, I don't know how it would go, but it might get you out of here.
But yes, and if that's the deal breaker, I'm in.
Well, we'll find out. Any other discussion?
If I might just say, the
Kelly, can
whole
you
idea is screening, so that nobody's seeing this. If you're not,
Well, can you speak to that then?
I've already invested in 7 different arborvitaes to try to make all of this behind some kind of screen, some in respect to my neighbors. I don't want them seeing something that doesn't please them. And so I was trying to go overboard with vegetative buffers and screening so that this is not something that they're confronted with.
Okay, thanks. Any other discussion?
Can I get one quick clarification? I don't want you to just shake your head. I don't want you to have to run back up there. One of the neighbors that commented said that the sauna is already in and in use, and I'm looking at one of your pictures.
It said it was on site.
Okay, so it's not in use, but it is on site.
Correct. And I feel no, I feel no need to justify it, but the sauna builder who I'm working with, who's based in Maine, sold his home. He worked with me to propose a very attractive arrangement for us to work together. And he said, I have to give this to you right now, even though you're not ready for it, because I'm selling my home and I can't move this twice. So I, on a leap of faith, said, okay, bring it. And it's not in use. It's doing nothing.
I was
at the
just
moment.
looking for clarification.
Yeah,
of
no,
what was
thank
said.
you.
All right.
I think Jim might have a comment, though.
Maybe, I think maybe it's more applicable after a motion, before a motion. I mean, just as we're planning where we go forward, I think I would oppose, I would vote no on any version of this that includes the changing room, but would.
At all?
At all. But would approve a version that omits the changing room.
Any other discussion?
We're kind of throwing our brains open to the
Throw your brain
public.
open.
I'm kind of torn between a no and an abstain, because I still feel that this whole, the additions and everything, I feel like we as the board should be taking a look at this more from the beginning. And maybe it was just the way it was written, but I thought we were really just approving the waiver. And I may not have read it clearly, but I feel there's a lot of other little things in the design elements and the lighting and the parking potential. Parking is right next to this. It shouldn't be a big deal because it's not going to expand to addition. I assume it's not expanding because there's no outside use of this, so it should just be the people that would be there anyway. But I just feel like I'm still a bit unclear. I know
So parking, lighting, all of those things that we looked at with the AEC application, for instance, those are site plan standards. And as proposed, if the waiver went through, if the board issued a design standard certificate for these criteria that we had just read out, all of them, the character, the windows and doors, the exterior facades, it would, the rest of what the applicant is proposing, the amount of impervious area they're proposing, all of that falls within the thresholds of a site plan amendment that would just need staff approval. So that's why that's not coming to the board right now.
my understanding or my wishful thinking is that when there were some adjustments to the regulations in the ordinance, site plan approvals could also, or staff approvals, I should say, could be bumped up to the full board if there was a necessity or a feeling or an agreement. And I just feel like this should be more in front of us for our approval rather than at the moment. I just feel like there's something lacking in what we're actually looking at for our own approval and for me to feel better about this.
It's duly noted, but I will just say for the public, this is being addressed at the staff level, and any part of this project which either changes shape or has magnitude to it does get bumped to us, and it's discretionary with you as well.
I have one more, could I ask one more question? Did the sauna that has been dropped off, did it come with the siding and the drip, just as we see it in this picture? Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
The answer was yes.
So that exists, and at least I am only asking that you make, if you were going to have a second building, a changing room, make it look like that.
Kelly, is that an agreeable condition if the board happens to vote in favor with the condition would be that the exterior of the building have the same shingles with no white trim?
There, yeah.
Okay.
However, one thing that Jason didn't mention, and I'm surprised on this, is the door and window, because that is included in this discussion.
That they
Of
conform.
the changing room.
You're not going to have a big
And-
glass window if it's a changing room.
But the door from this picture appears like it could be a flat panel door without any
Is that prohibited?
trim, which isn't necessarily compatible with this part of town.
Yeah, you raise a good point on the door and window, as depicted there or not.
And it says,
Appealing either, and that could be part of putting together the correct aesthetic for that.
so again, I'll just say that the door standard there is, in general, rectilinear window and door openings are the basic standard. Shapes of windows other than squares or rectangles are permitted. And then that first paragraph talks about the use of glass being allowed. It does not get into the materials specifically in the windows and doors section of doors. Outside of that exterior walls section is where it primarily talks about the facade materials.
So if a motion is brought up, then we're adding number 5, which is the changing room should be in the same trim and siding as the sauna, I think is where we ended up.
Is there a motion?
I'd be happy to do it. Be it ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact, design standard certificate, and waiver request for Great Cabin 8, Inc. for the addition of a 5-person sauna, changing room, cold plunge, and fire pit accessory to the existing bed and breakfast at 180 Main Street, Tax Assessor Map 13, Lot 4, to be built substantially as proposed with the application dated 10/29/24, finding that it meets the standards of the Freeport Village Overlay District Ordinance with the following conditions of approval. Number 1, this approval incorporates by reference all supporting plans that amend the previously approved plan submitted by the applicant and their representative at Project Review Board meetings on the subject application to the extent that they are not in conflict with other stated conditions. Number 2, prior to the issuance of a
I'd recommended we change number 2 to this language.
to the whole thing?
Yeah.
Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant submit the necessary, all of it?
Yes.
The necessary information for a site plan amendment, which based on previous discussion with the applicant would be for the proposed use to be available only to guests of the B&B.
I'm sorry, one revision. Can we go back to the waiver and cite the standard? Just. So
Is this going to be?
So the waiver request for the roof pitch standard at the beginning of the motion. So he said approve the printed findings of fact, design standard certificate, and waiver
And waiver
request
request.
for the allowance of the roof to not meet the roof pitch standard of the village overlay district, something to that effect.
What Kyle said.
I don't know if that works.
It's section 2.
Okay, the roof pitch standard identified in section 2 of the village overlay ordinance.
Do we have that, or do I need to attempt to?
Could you attempt?
So I'm going backwards to the start of this, right? Be it
Yes.
ordered that the Freeport Project Review Board approve the printed findings of fact, design standard certificate, and waiver request
For the roof pitch.
for the roof
standard
pitch
identified in section 2.3
identified in section 2.3
of the village overlay
of
ordinance.
the Village Overlay Ordinance for Great Cabin 8, Inc. And do I need read the rest of this? Why not? For the addition of a 5-person sauna, changing room, cold plunge, and fire pit accessory to the existing bed and breakfast at 180 Main Street, Tax Assessor Map 13, Lot 4, to be built substantially as proposed, with the application dated 10/29/24, finding it meets the standards of the Freeport Village Overlay District Ordinance with the following conditions of approval. I've already given you 1 and 2, correct?
2 is different?
I read that one already.
Correct, we altered 2.
And then number 3, prior to the start of construction, the applicant obtain any applicable permits from the Freeport Code Enforcement Officer. Number 4, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant provide additional detail regarding the retaining wall to show that it meets the material and height requirements of Village Overlay Ordinance. And number 5, that the changing room to be in the same trim and siding as shown with the sauna building. I believe that was it. Was there number 6?
I think maybe just something as will be reviewed by staff.
On number 5.
On number 5.
So changing room to be in the same trim and siding as shown in the sauna building to be confirmed by staff.
And doors and windows?
There's no,
No, there is no standard for the material of the door, just the shape.
is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I'll just say that I'm in favor of the motion, but I just want to note that this is a lesser standard than if it were in a commercial district that we're applying here. Yet, it's a stricter standard than if it were a residence, because this is largely a residential standard, residential neighborhood. And we don't allow many business activities in residential areas, so I'm sure the applicant will be respectful of that and with respect to the noise concern. Any other thoughts before we vote?
Are we potentially creating an ambiguity where we're incorporating the application, which has references to being used by guests, and while also saying in the terms that that's prohibited?
Say that again, Jim?
So we're incorporating the proposal of the application, which the application as written hasn't been amended to change the scope of usage, and it's described as being, sauna and self-filtering cold plunge to in-guests and community members.
So
Are we creating, no, my question is, are we creating a conflict by incorporating the application that says one thing and then imposing a term that says something different?
Don't you think the term overrules that?
I think that it should, but I, want to pose that question to make sure that
So
there's.
the village overlay ordinance doesn't bring use into question at all. The use is specifically under zoning and the site plan.
That's
side,
not
so-
my question.
Okay.
So, but if we're confident that the condition supersedes everything that's in the application, then I think that we can avoid that.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
so.
Is there a, I want to follow up on that, though. Once this is, if it is approved as is, they will go ahead and do what they're doing, and it will be available for use, or they have to come back and continue with the next step.
They have to go through the next
They
step.
have to continue with the next step. They have to get approval on the zoning side, which if that application specifies, as we outlined in the condition, that it's only for B&B guests, could fall under staff review. If that application states it's for public use, then it would need to come to the board for the site plan amendment on the zoning side.
But
Excuse me, could you just reread that, was it number 2, where we specifically talk about the guests?
Yep. So as prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant submit the necessary information for a site plan amendment, which based on previous discussion with the applicant would be for the proposed use to be available only to guests of the B&B.
Good, thank you.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. If I can do this from memory, alphabetically. Berger.
Reluctant, yes.
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Madeira.
Yes.
Monteleone.
No.
Reiki, yes. Yankee.
Yes.
Thank you. That is the end. Do we have anything else, Kyle, before we?
I don't think there's anything else. I think just a motion to adjourn.
Anything
Or-
else?
I do think, and I don't want to spend time on it now, but that question about the campground that came up earlier, we do need a plan to
Yeah.
clarify that.
So
Not now, but.
on that point, I mean, I would propose that we formally submit that question to legal review and get it, get that answer, because frankly, I think that it might be different than what what's.
Okay. My recollection of the meeting was different than a couple of you other folks. Why don't you just pin, you know what the question is, right?
Yep.
Pin that down.
But I would also ask, too, that if we are at having different perspectives, this may come up again in other situations, and that staff needs to, the staff and the board need to work together rather than going in different directions.
Would it make sense to get legal review, and if we have questions after legal review,
Yeah.
send it to planning board?
Absolutely, because it may be moot.
And
Anyways.
to the extent that the legal review comes back in conflict with terms that we previously imposed on a different applicant, can we bring that applicant back to essentially, reduce restrictions that we imposed on a different interpretation?
Here comes Caroline.
I'd like to suggest that we put this on a future agenda and actually just clarify the language, because staff has gone around on it, the board's gone around on it. We had the interpretation from the code officer, we had the condition that staff verify the square footage. So I think if you have a lull next month, which you might, I think we could get some legal clarification discussion and maybe clean it up and send a suggestion to the planning board
And I think there's probably
as a noticed agenda item.
some background in our meeting minutes for that.
Yep.
I recall it was a condition on the other one that only sites that had 5,000 feet were.
Yeah, there was a condition with square footage that it would be reviewed by staff, and they did work and submit data to the code officer on that.
Change the plan.
Okay.
Staff, I thought.
We're going to get,
Yeah. Okay.
we'll have something to look at.
Motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second?
Got to do a roll call vote.
Yes.
Berger.
Yes.
Donahue.
Yes.
Hamlin. Madeira. Monteleone.
Yes.
Yankee. Reiki. Yes.
Well done. Well done, Mr. Chairman.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Night, Jason. Night, Lynn.
Night.